Let's jump right into this strategic intelligence briefing. Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're mapping out the unprecedented escalatory rhetoric we're seeing right now between Iran and the United Arab Emirates. Look, this isn't just your standard regional posturing. We're looking at a situation that literally threatens a massive, immediate shock to global energy supply chains. Think of this as a high-level dossier. We're going to break down shifting security alliances, very specific military warnings, and the massive macroeconomic stakes involved. So if you're trying to understand the fragile threshold of global security and international energy markets today, well, this is the exact flashpoint you need to be watching.
To really grasp the gravity of this situation, we've got to start with this chilling warning. It was published by the IRGC-affiliated Tasnim news agency, attributed to a military source, and aimed directly at the UAE. It reads, "Sitting in a fragile glass house." It's a highly calculated metaphor, right? It implies that, sure, the UAE has built this towering, multi-billion-dollar economic marvel. Gleaming financial districts, massive commercial ports, hyper-advanced energy grids, but that very structure is fundamentally vulnerable to shattering if struck. The sheer financial density of the UAE's modern footprint makes it incredibly exposed. And honestly, this sets the analytical tone for everything we're about to unpack.
Over the next few minutes, we'll quickly move through the recent escalations, the specific threat vectors from the IRGC, those shifting security alliances, infrastructure vulnerabilities, and finally, what this all means for global energy.
Starting off with Section 1, the recent escalations and the trigger point for all of this.
It's wild to see how rapidly the diplomatic fallout has spiraled here. We start with the reported targeting of an industrial area near the Port of Fujairah. Now, why does that matter? Well, Fujairah is strategically vital. It sits just outside the Strait of Hormuz, acting as a crucial bypass for global shipping. So targeting anywhere near it is a highly calibrated message. The UAE followed up with a really strong official condemnation of Iran. But then, the tension just absolutely skyrocketed. Regional media began circulating intense warnings, suggesting Abu Dhabi might actually seek coordinated military action involving the United States and Israel. And boom, by Monday evening, that media cycle triggered a direct, published military threat from Tehran against the UAE. It is a classic, high-speed escalation ladder playing out right in front of us.
Let's move into our second area, the IRGC's threat vectors and their escalatory rhetoric.
There's a very careful diplomatic dance happening within the threats themselves. Officially, IRGC sources claim Tehran hasn't received any formal threats from the UAE, kind of brushing off the current tension as just media-driven. But then, in the very next breath, they explicitly promise a severe response with consequences the UAE would never forget. They lay down a distinctly hostile baseline by warning against repeating the mistake of the 40-day war. Now, in regional strategic parlance, bringing up a timeline like that, that's a warning of a grueling, protracted conflict designed to just entirely deplete national resources and morale. And crucial to all of this, they threaten severe retaliation if the UAE becomes what they call a tool of Israel. That specific perception is the absolute core of Tehran's anxiety right now.
Which brings us to Section 3, shifting security alliances, and how the map is being redrawn.
The crucial takeaway here is that the UAE strengthening ties with Israel is the primary catalyst prompting this aggressive move by Iran. The Financial Times recently exposed what they called a secret Israel-UAE military alliance during this confrontation. On top of that, there were reports of the UAE actually deploying Israeli military radar systems thousands of miles away in Somalia. The strategic depth of that is immense. Deploying radar in the Horn of Africa creates this massive early warning buffer zone that effectively monitors Iranian proxy movements across a huge geographic space. Throw in Israeli media leaks claiming a potential UAE strike on Iran, and you can see why for Tehran, the UAE is no longer just a neutral economic neighbor. They see it as actively integrating with Israel's deep security apparatus.
Because of all this, we are witnessing a massive strategic shift. Historically, Iran has maintained a posture of restraint when it comes to the UAE. That restraint was largely anchored by billions of dollars in shared, non-oil trade. It acted as a financial shield. But the source material notes that Tehran is now threatening to abandon this restraint entirely. They're warning of a strategic reclassification, meaning they could start treating the UAE not as an independent Arab state, but as an operational extension, literally a part of the Israeli entity, if the confrontation intensifies. That reclassification completely evaporates their historical economic buffer.
And this flare-up reveals a highly volatile web of interlocking threats. The UAE and Iran are at the center, sure, with the US and Israel acting as rumored military partners. But look at the wider network effect. We've also got reports of Hezbollah threatening Israel with a bloody decade, utilizing 1980s tactics. That is a highly specific and frankly terrifying detail.
Returning to 1980s tactics implies a devastating resurgence of asymmetric warfare, suicide bombings, shadow operations, stuff designed to plunge the entire region into unpredictable, chronic chaos. The UAE-Iran escalation isn't happening in a vacuum, it's just one node in a rapidly destabilizing regional architecture.
Let's pivot to Section 4, Infrastructure Vulnerabilities, or what we'll call the glasshouse reality.
The Iranian military source was absolutely explicit. They asserted that no location within Emirati infrastructure would be beyond reach. They are heavily signaling a willingness to expand their targeting parameters way beyond isolated border skirmishes. Geographically speaking, the Persian Gulf is incredibly narrow. Iran is emphasizing that its advanced arsenal of precision-guided ballistic missiles and loitering drone swarms can cross that short distance in literally a matter of minutes. That proximity means the very core of the UAE's industrial and economic footprint lives under a constant, immediate threat envelope.
And here's how Tehran defines the trigger for such an attack. They use the term irrational action. The danger here is that irrational action is deliberately left completely vague. It is pure psychological warfare. By refusing to objectively define what actually crosses this red line, Tehran forces the UAE into a paralyzing state of constant calculation. If Iran unilaterally decides the UAE has crossed this invisible threshold, they've stated it would instantly render all Emirati economic and strategic interests as legitimate military targets. It's effectively a tripwire placed in the dark.
So what exactly makes up the vital organs we're talking about? Well, the Port of Fujairah isn't just a local harbor. It's literally one of the world's top 3 bunkering hubs. Then you have critical energy distribution networks. We're talking massive desalination plants that provide the country's drinking water. And infrastructure like the ADCOP pipeline, which physically bypasses the Strait of Hormuz to pump millions of barrels of oil directly to the open ocean. These are the fragile structural assets of the national economy. If these targets are hit, the damage doesn't just stop at the UAE border, it instantly paralyzes global shipping logistics. Finally, Section 5, the global energy implications and cascading risks.
The macroeconomic stakes here are absolutely massive because the threat to the UAE's infrastructure doesn't exist in isolation. It's one heavily pressurized variable in a much broader matrix of instability. You've got the direct threats to the UAE, overlapping with those ongoing Israel-Hezbollah confrontations and compounded by the constant looming threat of closures at vital maritime choke points. When you combine these 3 highly volatile elements, you create an unprecedented pressure cooker. A spark in any one of these areas threatens to shatter international supply chains all at once.
To put a finer point on the global risk, the source material highlights that the Iranian army is already issuing escalatory warnings over the Strait of Hormuz, coinciding with the launch of an operation they refer to as the Freedom Project. The stats on the Strait of Hormuz are just staggering. Roughly 1/5 of the world's total global oil consumption, we're talking over 20 million barrels every single day, passes through this extremely narrow waterway. If the aggressive rhetoric we've seen directed at the UAE actually translates into kinetic conflict in or around the strait, the global energy market is looking at an immediate, catastrophic supply shock.
I want to leave you with this pressing question to consider as you process this intelligence briefing. We've mapped the rapid escalation ladder, the IRGC's highly specific warnings, and the massive infrastructure vulnerabilities at play. So if these regional alliances continue to polarize, if the UAE and Israel keep integrating their security apparatus, and Iran keeps pushing its deliberate targeting threshold in the dark, how will international security partners actually adapt? How can the global community protect the vital, irreplaceable supply chains from being shattered in this fragile glass house? Keep your eyes on the data and always keep questioning the shifting lines on the map.